digital, las tarjetas de presentación de negocio son cosa del pasado. De hecho, la mayoría de las personas que las reciben las pierden en cuestión de minutos. La videotarjeta de negocios de NowMedia es un video de su negocio especialmente creado por nuestros expertos con toda su información de contacto, los productos y servicios de su negocio, y puede ser enviado de manera rápida utilizando su teléfono móvil. Cientos de negocios ya están viendo la diferencia. Llámenos hoy al 83.
Broadcasting live from Houston, from the space city to the world. You are watching NowMedia Television.
Hello and welcome to the new episode of the Legal Talk with Natalia. On behalf of NowMedia Television, myself, I would want to welcome everybody on this very day. Today we are recording again from two different places in the world. NowMedia located in Houston, the space city, broadcasting to the world. I am in Warsaw, Poland, which is in Europe, and we are having actually the Texan heat today. And Brett Lovett, who is my guest today, whom we already had here on the show, is in California, where I understand it is also quite a warm day. What's the weather there, Brett?
Right where I'm at, 'cause I'm in the desert, so it's about 100 degrees, but it's a dry heat. So if you walk outside, it doesn't really have the humidity. So 100 kind of feels more like 88 to 90.
Especially when you are used to that, and I think that my experience with Texas is always like I'm just surprised that it can be this hot. But in Poland we also have it. Brett, tell us a few words about yourself, so that everybody will know why we chose to talk about the topic we'll be talking about today, which is the obligations of the company owners when it comes to harassment complaints. So when the complaints are filed. Brett, what gives you authority to speak about it?
I've been training in this genre, or instructing in this genre, for about 15 years now. And started out tutoring underneath a professor who also went off and really started with corporate trainings, and corporate or company trainings turned into government trainings. For local city and county governments. And then that turned into educational training. So training in the educational sector, that includes K through 12, all the way up into post-secondary and university. So it's really those three areas that we provide instruction in. Again, it's the business sector, government sector, and the educational sector. So really, that's just about everything. It's a topic that has been around for a long time. We've modified it. We've tried to adjust to the dynamic in society. And I have my own unique approach to the topic of hostile work environment, sexual harassment, bullying, intimidation, all of those things that fall under the employment law umbrella. So I look for every opportunity I can to share that information with anybody who's willing to learn and to see, hey, is there perhaps a need for me to make a personal adjustment? Is there perhaps a need for my organization or my company or the entity that I'm associated with, that I make decisions for? Is there an opportunity for adjustment there too? So that's really kind of what I've been doing for the last 7 to 10 years, but 15 years total, is trying to make an impact, a positive impact in the workplace when it comes to people's behavior, employees' behavior, so that they do not end up in a formal legal dispute.
Speaking of which, I really want to concentrate on our topic. we have a business, the business is operating, the business owners think everything is fine and they don't expect anything like that. And finally, there comes a day where the harassment complaint is filed with the company at this stage, not with the court, with the company. Brett, what are the obligations of the company owners when such a harassment complaint is filed?
In my experience, this is a mindset issue, Natalia, and it starts at the top. So whoever the president is, or whoever the CEO is, whoever the board is, whoever the directors are, it's their mindset that sets the pace for the rest of the organization. So however those decision makers think about this particular subject is what they're probably going to encounter. So if you have an organization or an entity or business that doesn't really give much attention to this, then I think 1 + 1 = 2. When something arises, and it will arise, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So when something arises for an organization that doesn't put too much importance on this, they're going to be caught off guard, and they're going to be caught in a tight position. So to answer that, what can organizations or companies or businesses or whatever the entity is, what can they do? Well, the number one thing I say is to be preventative. You want to stay as far away from difficulty as you can. So that starts now. That starts at the top. That starts with how we engage with our employees. What's the message that we send to our employees about how we feel about matters of hostile work environment, abusive conduct, abusive behavior, which includes sexual harassment, which includes intimidation, which includes bullying? What kind of message do we send to our employees? What tone do we set? That is what organizational leaders, business leaders, whoever it may be, that's what they need to ask themselves. They need to self-assess what message they are sending. And then they need to see, are there adjustments that we may need to make here? Do we need to be clearer about where we stand on this issue? So that's what I try to help businesses and organizations see, that they've got to be preventative. Even organizations that take it very seriously and are preventative, they're not immune from a complaint being filed. You can never completely, immune yourself from such an event. But even if that happens, they're far less likely to be damaged by it. They're far less likely for the brand to be damaged. They're far less likely for monetary damages to come at it. Far less likely. Not that it can't happen, but far less likely than an organization that really doesn't put it as a priority. They really expose themselves to liability in this area if they don't take it seriously. So what can a company or an organization do? They could be preventative. And then once a complaint is filed, because it will happen, then it's what measures they take. And there's a couple specific measures they need to have in place once a complaint is filed.
So now you have explained that every time, everywhere, in every single business, there might come a moment where this sort of situation can happen, that someone will be claiming, I was harassed, I was suffering from bullying, I was intimidated in my workplace. And knowing that, do you think it is advisable for the companies, speaking of these preventive measures we might have, to have a clear procedure regarding potential complaints? Is it beneficial for the company to establish some proceedings, internal proceedings, to address those issues? And if yes, what such a procedure should embrace?
Yeah, good question. So is it beneficial? Absolutely. But it's not just beneficial, it's required. So there are entities or organizations or businesses that we come across, or that I come across from time to time, who do not even have a company policy in place. Or if they have a company policy in place, they don't have a clear section on hostile work environment. or harassment in the procedures within that policy. So when I make contact with an organization makes contact with me saying, we're looking into this, we need this, one of the first questions I ask is, what does your company policy say? What does your organizational policy say? So one, do you have one? And two, what does it say? Now understand this when it comes to policy, and I explain this to whoever I'm dealing with on the front end, as well as the employees once I'm in an instructional setting with them. That is not the exhaustive, the company policy is not the exhaustive understanding of the process. It's the bare minimum threshold. So that's all that I'm getting them to look at, is I want them to understand, you work for this organization or this company, you need to know what their stand is. But whatever that stand is and whatever they outline in the policy is the bare minimum threshold that we should understand to give us some sort of direction on if and when this matter or a matter arises, how they will be able to proceed going forward. It's going to be much more involved than what just the policy says, but they need to know the basic steps that they need to take. And many organizations, even with company policies, Natalia, the employees are still not very cognizant or aware of what they should do if something happens.
And when we already talk about setting up this procedure, where we talk about awareness, when we talk about being preventive, we do everything we can so that this potential situation of harassment does not really happen. However, if it does happen and it's not addressed, what are the potential consequences the company owners might suffer from if they really ignored, or if they don't have procedures in place?
Simply put, the consequences would be severe. If an organization who has a human resources department or some sort of department where if something's happening, that an employee reports abusive conduct or behavior, and they do not take that complaint seriously, whether the intake person or the human resources person who's taking it in, whether they think it's valid or not, does not matter. They are required to follow through on every single complaint, even if their initial thought, internal thought, is that this is frivolous or this is somebody being oversensitive. They can't and should not do that. They need to look into the matter. What I always say, and you've probably heard this in the legal profession as well. I give people three things to think about. Number one is you want to document. Number two is you want to document. And number three is you want to document. So an organization that takes a complaint and doesn't treat that complaint or kind of just does a self-judgment without following through on the procedures of the process really exposes themselves to legal liability. They need to document and show that they took the matter seriously. Then they need to show what steps they did in regarding to once they documented the complaint. Did they provide training to the organization as a whole? Did they provide corrective action awareness to a potential individual who is creating that environment? What steps did they take once the complaint was made? If it elevates to the courts, that's going to be looked at. And if they can't provide sufficient documented, it's not what they say, it's sufficient documented evidence that these are the steps that they took in accordance with their company or organizational policy, then that organization is opened up to damages, and they could be in restrictions and all sorts of sanctions, not only economically but otherwise. So that's why we say severe. If they do not take it seriously, they open themselves up to severe repercussions.
Red, it's been a pleasure for this part to be talking with you about it. I find this conversation absolutely interesting and really explaining the core of it. And we will hear from you more after the break. So let me invite everybody to a short break.
y bolitas es la catedral de la explicación. Este programa es la única parada que necesitas para entender los porqués y cómo de todo lo que pasa en México y el mundo. Lunes a viernes, 7 p.m. por Heraldo Televisión.
Welcome after the break. It is my pleasure again to continue the conversation with Brett Lovett of harassmentcompliancetraining.com. And we are continuing talking about the obligation of the company owners when it comes to the harassment complaint being filed with the company. I understand it is a huge shock for everybody involved. And I wanted to ask you, what are the potential legal safeguards that can be applied or that apply when such a complaint is filed? I have been talking to you about it. I have been here in Poland. I called onto the committee as a lawyer here that would investigate a potential complaint from the employee. And I really recall so well this sort of a bitter atmosphere around the person who filed this complaint, but even worse atmosphere around the person who was the potential perpetrator. So honestly, when you see that the dynamic in case of such a complaint might work this way, what do you think, Brett, are the safeguards for everybody involved in this very delicate situation?
That's a pretty involved answer because there's a lot of elements there. I think the best way for me to answer this is just what I've seen in my experience. It's a scary situation for people. It's an intimidating situation. It's full of anxiety for many people. And just right there, I think you have to recognize the emotions that go into something like this, whether you're the person filing the complaint or you're the person that the complaint is about. It's going to be a difficult process. And what I usually tell people when I'm instructing in programs is I say, think about that. Put yourself in that position. This is why we're going through training like this, or this is why we're talking about this, is I want you to stay as far away from that dynamic as possible. Because human resources, they're not gods. They can't read people's hearts. You get involved in a situation with somebody else, and then you have to bring other people in. As soon as you bring other people in, no matter how sophisticated they are, no matter how intelligent they are, the matter becomes more complicated the more people you involve. So why not stay away from conduct that would put you in front of a bunch of other people who have to ask you questions, look in, investigate, make you feel uncomfortable, make you feel anxious. I always try to take that route first. Stay away from it by putting yourself in some sort of setting like that in the future. Having said that, if you still find yourself in such a situation, then recognize the emotions. These are emotions you're going to deal with: anxiety and fear and not knowing what's going to happen, retribution, people taking sides, right? People take sides for one reason, because they lack maturity. A mature person does not take sides. A person who lacks maturity is a person who quickly takes sides. So I leave that for people to make their own. You can make out of that what you want, but the truth is the truth in that regard. It is a sign of lack of intelligence and lack of maturity that people would quickly take sides, and yet we see it happening in business, in entertainment, in politics, whatever the case is that you want to look at. Having said that, though, what I do is often I'll hear somebody who is generally the one who needs or feels compelled to make a complaint will say, well, they'll come to the HR department or whoever the directive person is, and they'll say, I need to tell you this thing, but I need to tell you in complete confidence. You can't tell anybody that it was me. So I want to make this complaint, but you can't tell anybody about it. And that's a difficult thing for a supervisor or for a manager or for a human resources director. So I usually touch on this in my instructional group trainings, where I'll say, how would you respond to that? So I don't give them the answer straight away, but I ask them, well, how would you respond to that? And I just want to hear what their thinking is. Not that there's necessarily a right or a wrong, but I want to hear what their thinking is on how you deal with somebody who comes to you with this extremely sensitive material and then tells you that it has to be confidential. Because ultimately, this is what happens, is that when you come and file a formal complaint, you cannot demand or request full confidentiality. That's not how the process works. So what I encourage decision makers or investigators or whoever the human resource lead is on looking into the matter is that they have to be able to say, we understand the sensitivity of this. We cannot guarantee you confidentiality. What we can guarantee you is that we will dignify you and those who are involved in this complaint to the best of our ability. I usually share something along those lines because of the extreme sensitivity of such a complaint.
And because of the obligation not to simply try to ignore the problem when it already is there. And we already know it's hard when this situation happens. Someone comes and files a complaint about the harassment happening in the workplace. But it can get worse than that. And worse than that is the court proceedings. Is there anything that you can, in simple words, say to the business owners how to prevent the situation or how to act also towards the remaining employees when such a complaint is actually filed with the court?
Yeah. So again, I go back to that previous segment that we had when we talked about preventative measures. Everything goes back to those preventative measures. I think business owners or decision makers in whatever genre we're talking about, I think sometimes they struggle to really grasp that once a complaint is filed internally, they have only a few steps that really remain within their control. They really need to take those first one or two steps in the appropriate way. I'm not sure all business owners really understand that. Because if they do not take those steps in the appropriate way, they only have about one or two chances to do so before it elevates to the courts. And if it does, they've really put themselves in a bad position. Because here's what happens. When a complaint is filed internally, okay, and the HR department's looking into it, or it's an internal matter, context does matter a bit. Not as much as the impact that the complaint has had, but context, meaning a person's reasons for why they may present why they did what they did, why they said what they said. So context or intentions will matter a little bit. What people don't realize is once you make it into the courts, intent is zero, maybe 1%. Impact is 99%. So if you're going to come into the courts and say, this is the way I was raised, you have to understand, court, I was raised this way. That's why I said this. You have to understand that this is the dynamic I had with these workmates for years. That's why we did this thing. See, those are all defenses. And the court's going to say, we absolutely believe you. We do, sincerely. We believe you that your intent was not to harm. Unfortunately, once you're here, once you're in this official setting, intent does not matter. It is only impact. And I think that's generally in my preventative trainings, that's generally a pretty big point that if they didn't understand that before, they had best understand it now if they really want to keep themselves out of difficulty.
From what you are saying, a lot can be done before any complaint is being filed. And I want to ask you about, of course, education. But before that, I think that we need to talk about practicalities first. And practicalities is, to one of my previous questions, you answered documents, documents, documents. Please tell us what sort of records should the company have? How should this entire process be documented so that it forms credible evidence in case of this harassment complaint reaching the level of the courts? What is helpful for the employee to have in terms of records to see how they handle the issue, to see that the workplace was actually a safe one and there wasn't a space for harassment?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be reams and reams of administrative paperwork. It could be something as simple as the individual came to the department and reported behavior that they felt was abusive. So it could literally be notating either in written form or in electronic form, notating the date, the time, the employee that made the comment, whoever the employee or employees are that were involved in the matter, and what was said by the employee, and what direction was given by the administrative person hearing the complaint. Just simply recording that and putting that in the file is in of itself shows that the complaint was heard and it was addressed. Okay, now an individual may not approve or like the way that it was initially addressed. That's a whole separate issue. But just to simply document. So do you see what I mean? This is simple. Just simply doing that, because there are many times where I've seen organizations say, well, yeah, we had the complaint. We felt it was this. We felt it wasn't, tangible. We didn't feel that there was merit behind it. And once it elevated the court said, well, what you felt, your feelings in this genre do not really count. They don't count for much. You should have wrote what it was, and you should have addressed it, whether you felt it was overly sensitive or frivolous. You should have addressed it as if it was the biggest complaint you'd ever heard. So you have to address each one in that way. You cannot make snap judgments as to what you think and what you feel. You have to be uniform in how you address each one, no matter what your personal conclusion is, or even your team conclusion or your department conclusion is. You have to address each one in a uniform way. So doing that could be simply acknowledging. And then what else did they do? Think forward. Think if you're a business owner or a decision maker. When's the last time we had training? Well, now we've got this complaint. Maybe we need to look at getting some training for the group. If there's some corrective action, very personal information here, maybe you've had training, but this individual is crossing over the line. Well, maybe we need to get him some one-on-one or her some one-on-one behavioral training, which we also provide. So there's a couple of different aspects here. So they need to show that they reported it, they recorded it, they took some steps to help the organization or the individual, and that could be in group training or in one-on-one training. So these are some of the ways in which they can show the court, should it elevate to such a thing, that these are the steps we took to show that we took it seriously.
Brett, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Can you please tell us how people can get hold of you in case your talk and your answers actually touch their hearts and their minds in a way that they would want to have the harassment compliance training? Let me remind everybody that, as far as I understand, it's an element of the federal law. So it's actually the fact that Brett is in California doesn't prevent him from doing the trainings all over the United States. And that's actually what he's been doing for the past 7 years. Brett, how is it easiest to contact you?
I think just through our website. We have harassmentcompliancetraining.com. On there is contact forms. So if an individual or an organization says, hey, I need to look into this, I have some questions, it's right there on our contact form. They could just put, we're so-and-so, and this is what we're looking into. And I or somebody will quickly respond to them. And pretty soon after that, I usually just engage people in a conversation on phone or over Zoom. Hey, what are you looking for? What are your needs? How can I help you meet the needs of your organization? As you mentioned, we're national, so we go all over the place. We do 3 different modalities. We will do in-person, live, on-site. We will do virtual live, which is like this through Zoom. We can teach. We're very proficient at it. We're not. We're very good. We're expert at delivering in this modality. And then also we have pre-recorded, meaning self-paced. Somebody can log into our system. We have a separate system somebody can log into and just go at their own pace over the course of a couple of weeks or a month. So we cover all bases between those three levels or modalities, and then we do it all over the nation. So if somebody wants information, they want to have a conversation, they want to know more about this, they want to know if they're exposed or how they can be helped, we just have a conversation. So by all means, go to the harassmentcompliancetraining.com. Our phone number is there, the email's there, our contact form is there. We make it as simple as possible to have a conversation.
Thank you so much, Brett. And it is really my pleasure to have you here again. I think that it's never enough talking about how important it is. It can virtually and in reality save people's lives because of how severe this is. Not mentioning really that it can save a lot of money for businesses or the businesses themselves if they take appropriate measures when it comes to harassment training, bullying prevention, and all of that. Thank you so much, Brett, once again. And let me welcome everybody to a short break.
Hello, my name is Charles Sanders, and I'm a personal injury attorney with the Rose Sanders Law Firm, based in Texas and with offices in Houston, Dallas, McAllen, and El Paso. We assist individuals throughout the entire state who have suffered harm due to the negligence of another person. With my experience as an insurance adjuster, I understand and I know exactly how to counter the strategies employed by insurance companies, and I'm bringing this knowledge to you. We handle a wide variety of situations, ranging from car accidents to defamation and unsafe property conditions. We are here to provide support and legal representation at no cost to you. Call us today at 713-221-3773.
Welcome after the break with our new guest for today. New, but someone who you might already know, Fran Brockstein, who is a mediator and a former attorney for 30 years from Texas, now living in Marble Falls, but that doesn't stop her from being a successful mediator for the cases from Houston. Hello, Fran. It's great to have you with us again.
Thank you for inviting me again, Natalia.
It's always my pleasure. I learn from you a lot, and I really appreciate your experience. But I think that the fantastic thing about you is that you have this absolutely wonderful approach, combining your personal experience with the things that you see in your practice. And this is why, for today, we chose a fantastic topic. We're going to be discussing something that happens to so many of us, something that happens to so many people around, which is the things connected with the breakup, and that after the breakup, the problems are actually not stopping in terms of co-parenting, in terms of having to bring up children together. In fact, they are, as Fran said to me before the program, they are transitioning and they sometimes even deepen. And Fran, your general remark: people suffer the breakup, let us say they go through divorce, they separate, they think they are over and that their life is going to be perfect and happy ever after. What's the reality of it?
Well, from personal experience, I can tell you it just changes, because you still have to, as a parent, you still have to deal with each other, and life is difficult and hard. And so you need to try to be kind with yourself and give yourself some time to heal. A breakup is a death of a relationship, and it's hard. And everyone reacts differently to death. Many times it brings out the worst in people. I've often said to people, you divorce a stranger because the person you're divorcing is not who you were married to. I can't tell you at mediation how many times people have said, my spouse is not, I don't know who my spouse is anymore. And I said, well, that's very common. So that's the problem in a breakup, is that it is one of the worst times of your life. Be kind to yourself, give yourself some time to grieve. And ideally, if you're having problems, go see a counselor and get some professional help. It's worth it. It can save you a lot of hardship and pain. And I will tell you, as from my own experience, it will get better. It just takes a while.
Fran, when we talk about the reality of life after a breakup, we inevitably need to mention some things that connect to the fact that a lot of people think that this is where their legal problems stop. But I don't believe it is really true. You can have new problems. So if you could tell us what sort of legal issues can arise after the breakup when it comes to things you see in mediation.
Well, that's a great question, Natalia, because life is unpredictable, period. And so even if you have the most beautiful legal document, then real life happens. People lose jobs, cars break. Sometimes there's another issue in their life, such as a death in their family, which upends their entire thing. Kids get sick, kids change, kids want to do different extracurricular activities. And so there's lots of challenges for people to have to renegotiate what they thought was final. The reality in life is it's never final. It's always moving, it's always changing. And we need to try to be flexible. And I encourage people to try to have a sense of humor. Sense of humor goes a long way in these type of situations.
And when it's just to give people a little bit of example, I understand that when you said that we believe things are settled, we have a perfect mediation settlement agreement. And this is actually where the journey starts, not ends. So we can have a revision of child support arrangements. We can have revisions of visitation. We can have a revision of parental rights. We can have people moving abroad and needing to do that. We can have children changing schools. We can actually list those questions up and up and up. And the question is, to which extent people really can predict what can happen? And do you see any general clause in the mediation agreement, how you can ensure that you are doing well and you have something general for the future, something you can base upon when those future problems arise?
Well, and if people want to, in my mediated settlement agreements, I will include a statement that says they must return to mediation before they can go back to court and litigate anything. There was a family I worked with many years ago. They came to me every year to renegotiate their arrangement, and they would bring the kids in, and I would interview each of the children individually. And I basically just asked the kids, what extracurricular activities do you want to do this year? They would tell me in a separate room. And then I would go back to the parents and tell the parents, this is what your children want to do this year. And we would renegotiate everything. Because, as you know, when they're in sports or music, there's all kinds of practices and rehearsals they have to go to. And so one year I asked the family, why do you keep coming back to me? They go, we really like you. And I said, but you guys could sit at your kitchen table and do this yourselves. You really don't need me. Just talk to your kids. But they were with me until the last one turned 18 and went to college. So, mediation, that's why I love mediation. It can be flexible. And for that family, I became an extended family member for a few years, and they were a lovely family, and I enjoyed working with them. So that's an unusual story, but it's a very heartwarming story because I saved them many, many hours of aggravation and money going into court to litigate over basically very simple little changes that needed to be made.
Yeah, I like the idea about the mediation clause in the mediation agreement that enhances cooperation and extrajudicial solutions for the problems that might arise. But I think that quite a lot of people, when they already understand, okay, it is not over with the divorce, so when maybe, so I think a lot of people would ask you, when might it be over? Is it 3 years, 5 years? And then I like your answer that you were actually giving to this situation where you say it's not about co-parenting, it's also about co-grandparenting.
Yeah.
So actually this is something that can link people practically for their future lives forever.
And as long as the children are alive, you are connected. And my ex-husband and I now co-grandparent our grandchildren. And so when I love saying that to couples when they're divorcing because they think it's going to end. It never ends. You're connected forever with children. And so you need to learn to be kind and gentle with each other.
Which is probably the most difficult thing of it all. But when we're talking about our topic, which is reality of life after a breakup, I do believe that an important part of this reality is the new partner in your ex-partner's life or new partner in your own life when there is children. Because there is already 4 different individuals, 4 different adults that are influencing children's lives. And tell me some of the stories you know about it and some tips how to ensure that in this new environment, everything goes the best possible way.
Well, usually when a new person comes into the relationship, this family unit, there's some bumps in the road, and that's to be anticipated. You've got to learn to work it out. Now, you can either all fight about it all the time, or what I recommend is that you learn to negotiate with one another. And I saw one family that I worked with many years ago. The ex-wife and the ex-husband hated each other. But the 2 women, his new wife and his ex-wife, got along fabulously. And they parented the children and kept him out of it. And in fact, he passed away, they now co-grandparent together. And it was interesting. I've never seen 2 women get along so well, but they put the kids first and the kids' needs first, and everybody was happy. And the gentleman's life was even better because his new wife stopped the fighting with his ex-wife.
That's actually a very, very fantastic story.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that this is a sort of a practical approach in all of this. But tell me what you can do in fact, in mediation, when quite a lot of people believe that their new partner has something to say about the children upbringing, or, for example, they want to go to mediation to mediate things regarding the children, which are not the children of this very person. And out of our experience, we already know that this person appearing either in the court or in mediation can actually detriment the entire process because of the high emotion involved in anybody seeing the new partner by my ex-partner's side, right?
Well, and that I have been doing this so long, I do some things that most mediators won't do. I sometimes do include the new spouse or the significant other. Sometimes I put them in separate rooms to keep, my goal is to bring the hostility down. I don't want to escalate anything. And so if that person is going to be in the child's life and be part of the new family unit, if they're the troublemaker, you might as well bring them into the mediation and let them express their feelings. Sometimes their feelings are totally legitimate. Other times they need a reality check. And I've done that with young couples that were breaking up, that their parents were supporting them like college students, and then they had a baby, and the grandparents did not agree. And he had his parents, she had his parents, and I finally explained to them the reality of what happens when you have a little baby. And I had to get the grandparents on board too. And in reality, I think there was a healing that occurred for that entire family to benefit the baby because everyone needed to work together to help the baby.
And Fran, thank you for this story. And this is why I love speaking with you so much, because you always bring something out of your life, out of your experience, something that really explains these things into so much detail. That would be it in the topic of a reality of life after the breakup. And after the little break that I'm going to invite everybody to now, we are going to talk about the tips for good co-parenting. See you after the break.
El tema está en los países.
Liderazgo y experiencia.
Nuestro país debe meterse en las grandes discusiones y en los grandes debates.
Son parte de una carrera exitosa.
Juegan dos estados.
Él es referente en el periodismo.
No definen el 2024.
Javier Solórzano te espera cada noche para llevarte las noticias, el análisis y las entrevistas más importantes de lo que sucede día a día en el país.
Este es el referente de la noche.
Welcome after the break. Fran Broxton with me again to talk about tips for co-parenting. And I think that this is a topic that everybody should be interested in, because with Fran's vast experience, there are words of wisdom that can't be missed and things that can't be said better than Fran will. Fran, starting with that, from your experience, some of the most essential tips you might give for effective co-parenting.
Well, basically, if you have a child, you're connected the rest of your lives, whether you like it or not. And I always tell people I co-grandparent with my ex-husband, so it never ends. The one thing about kids and life is that none of us know what the future holds. And I always warn people, you know, you need to treat the other person with dignity and respect and common courtesy, because in the future, the tables may be turned on you. So what goes around comes around. You know, I've also heard that karma can be very nasty when it comes back. So I have found that instead of trying to be the winner or trying to beat the other person down, learn to negotiate. In fact, that's how I learned to be a mediator, was that after I divorced, my ex and I were still having to deal with each other. And we had to renegotiate and develop a new relationship. It was not a relationship together, but we did have to co-parent our children. And so that is how I learned to do this. And I found it easier, instead of fighting, to learn to get along and to put the kids first and our adult needs second. If you put the kids first and their needs and their desires and their hopes and dreams number one, and you as a parent or the adult is number two, then I think that will really benefit the children in the long run.
Fran, co-parenting can actually be about having in your household children from different relationships. So you are parenting, being a parent to children that are yours and children that are not yours. But this can also be about the same child going in and out from your household to see the other parent. And this brings a lot of stress on children. There come a lot of changes with it all. Children sometimes feel burdened. And do you see any way to make parents understand it better? Sometimes they take it for granted that they can just make their kids go through whatever they want. How do you ensure that parents understand in this co-parenting the child's perspective in that?
Well, many times in a very difficult breakup, the family, the mom and dad and the kids need to go to a child counselor, because that person can meet with the child and meet with mom and dad together and separate and work together. In fact, that's what my ex and I did for a year. And I will tell you, it was the best money I ever spent. We learned a lot about each other. We learned tips on what to do to help her and how to reduce her stress. And it is really, and I use the term child abuse, when parents put adult burdens and share their feelings with the child. That is way too much for a small child or even a teenager to have to deal with. So parents need to deal with their issues and let the child be a child. Children love both parents. Even I've had children that were abused by a parent. They still love their parents. And so you cannot make that feeling go away, but you have to accept it and move on. So again, children love their parents. They want them to be perfect. We recognize that none of us are perfect. We all make tons of mistakes as parents and as humans. And basically, we need to be there to support our children to make their lives less stressful.
Thank you for that. And in fact, I need to tell you that's the approach that a lot of parents take when they say, oh, my child is my best friend. And I am terrified when I hear that, because basically what it means is that they are treating a child like it was this parent's equal. What does it mean? The child is unequipped with everything that we as adults have. Doesn't have the meditation techniques, doesn't have the ways to alleviate the burden, doesn't have the effective ways to combat stress, doesn't have the terminology, the experience to understand what the parents are sharing with them, basically. And recently, I had a mother that came to me, and I was in the process of divorcing her like 10 years ago. After these 10 years, she comes back to share her experience. What she says is, I was treating my children as my friends, and I burdened them so much that each of them ended up in a therapy because they didn't know how to cope with that. I was telling them everything because I thought it's equal, it's good. They were telling me everything, so I'll be sharing everything with them. And the truth is that it doesn't work this way. And you need to understand your role as a parent. Otherwise, you are going to hurt your child. But even more to that, you need to make your new partner aware of it. And this is a new thing I have noticed. Quite a lot of people feel the duty to share with the children what really happened during the breakup. And this is a huge burden. Have you seen that in your practice, Fran?
I've seen it so many times. And I will tell you, even when my daughter was in high school, we were talking and she said to me, I never want to know why you divorced my dad. Please don't ever share that with me. Because unfortunately, many of her friends in high school, their parents had divorced, and those kids were all in therapy. We had anorexics, we had cutters, we had kids doing drugs, we had kids running away. I mean, these kids were obviously under a lot of stress. And I told her, I said, it is none of your business why your dad and I divorced. We are your parents. Our job is to love you, and we will always be your parents. And it's your job as our child not to be burdened by what I call adult issues. And now she is a grown-up. She's way too old now. It's upsetting me that she's getting so old. But to this day, there are certain adult topics that I would never discuss with her, because her job, even though she's an adult, way too old, and made me a grandmother, it's her job to still love her dad and I. And it's not my child, it's our child. That's a big deal, and judges notice that. When you refer in court to my child when you're going through a divorce, that's a big tick mark for the judges, because it's not your child or his child, it's our child.
Graham, you put it in so effective words, but I just wanted to tell you that even though your daughter is getting older, you are not. So that's the exception. And I can see that very well and effectively, knowing you for some years already. But another thing that really is interesting to me in co-parenting is that a lot of people think that, okay, we are now divorced, the papers are settled, we have all the documents, our stress will calm down, and now we will have like a new moment of life when we will be far more relaxed. The truth is that it doesn't work this way. And I am actually telling my clients, or when I'm in mediation, that, listen, there were some differences that made you split. If you think that with the split, those differences disappeared, you are totally wrong.
Yeah.
So I would even say that because of the love you shared beforehand, it could have been easier for you to deal with those differences. Now you are in a different moment of your life. You don't have those things that link you. You only have things that actually separate you. It is even more difficult to find a way to agree on some topics. And people have different styles of parenting. Fran, from your practice, what is the most effective way, or what are the effective ways to bring the styles of co-parenting of the parents together to some sort of a common platform? What should they do?
The reality is, if the other parent has different rules at their house, it's their house. And they're, the rules at your house are at your house. Kids are adaptable. And if you don't like what's happening at the other house, if it's not dangerous and life-threatening, there's nothing you can do about it. Judges are not here to micromanage parents. They really don't want to be pulled in to people fighting about little things. And so the reality is, what's happening at your ex's house truly is not your business unless it is a life-threatening issue. And those do come up. That's a totally different discussion than we're having today. But you need to basically support the other parent. And if the child complains to you, say, well, those are the rules at your other parent's house, and you need to respect your parent, period. Keep it short and sweet. And then, you're allowed to have the rules that you want to have at your house. And the kid, it is tough. Of course, it's better. I've actually told people, if you want to control the other parent, stay married to them, which most people then look at me like I've got three heads. But the reality is, once you break up, you lose a lot of control with the other parent.
And therefore, do you encourage people to, for example, set up a set of rules, and so go to mediation to agree on something that will be the common rules? I need to tell you, I do that with my clients. Sometimes it's about food or diet, because people blame each other. Oh, you're giving them junk food. No, you're doing that. And the kids in between, they just do that. They want to have junk food, so they will be encouraging that with both parents. So do you do like parenting plans after breakups with co-parenting?
If I get two parents that are willing to do that, I am so happy. It's not very often, but I have in the past had people. I actually had one couple that got along so well. I said, it's none of my business, but why are you breaking up? And they said, we are fabulous parents and we love each other, but we cannot live together. And they co-parented better than most married couples because they did exactly what you're talking about, Natalia. They set some ground rules at both homes that they both followed. And then as the children got older, because children are constantly growing, maturing, and changing, they talked on a regular basis and modified the rules to meet the children's needs as they got older or as life happened.
Fran, it's been great to have you. Thank you so much. And please let our viewers know what's the best way to get hold of you for mediation, for any tips on co-parenting. Please tell us.
My website is Fran at familylawforyou.com. I answer my phone 7 days a week. And if you're in Texas, I will give you a free 10-minute phone consultation. If you're not in Texas, I really can't give you any legal advice. But I encourage everyone to be kind and gentle and to have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. And with that, I would want to close this episode on behalf of NowMedia Television and me, Natalia Trajka, and see you in the next episode. Thank you so much.
This has been a NowMedia Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.
As a home or business owner, it can be tough to find a painting company that you can rely on. Look no further. Hi, I'm Courtney Hughes, owner of 360 Painting West Houston, your go-to painting company for residential and commercial needs. 360 Painting's mission is simple. We want to provide you with the highest quality finish and the best painting experience possible. Our company's residential and commercial painting services are founded on 3 core values. First, quality.